At my sister's wedding, my husband whispered, "Look at the guest list. We need to leave now." I thought he was being dramatic. Turns out, he saved our lives. My sister Rachel's wedding was supposed to be perfect. She'd been planning it for 2 years, obsessing over every detail from the color of the napkins to the exact shade of roses in her bouquet. The venue was a gorgeous historic mansion overlooking the lake, decorated with white and gold everything, twinkling lights, and enough flowers to stock a garden center. I was her maid of honor, which meant I'd been dragged into every decision, every crisis, every meltdown over the past 24 months. But seeing her walk down the aisle in our grandmother's vintage lace dress, looking radiant and happy, made all the stress worth it. The ceremony was beautiful. Rachel and her fiancé David exchanged heartfelt vows that made half the guests cry, including me. My husband Mark sat in the front row, looking handsome in his navy suit, occasionally catching my eye and smiling. Everything felt magical and perfect. The reception was in full swing when it happened. We'd just finished the formal photos, and I was finally able to relax and enjoy the party. The band was playing, people were dancing, and the champagne was flowing freely. I grabbed a glass and found Mark at our assigned table, studying something intently. "Having fun?" I asked, sliding into the chair beside him. He didn't answer immediately. His jaw was tense, his eyes scanning the room with an expression I'd never seen before. Mark was former military, and sometimes that training showed in the way he observed his surroundings. But this was different. This was alert in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Mark?" I touched his arm. "What's wrong?" That's when he leaned close and whispered those words that would change everything. "Look at the guest list. We need to leave now." I blinked at him. "What? Why? The party just started, and I'm the maid of honor. I can't just—" "Look at it." His voice was urgent but quiet. He slid the printed guest list across the table toward me. "Third page. Table assignments." I thought he was being ridiculous. Maybe he was having social anxiety or didn't want to make small talk with Rachel's college friends. Mark could be antisocial sometimes, especially at big gatherings. "You're being dramatic," I said, but I picked up the guest list anyway to humor him. The first 2 pages were normal. Family members I recognized, college friends, work colleagues, a few plus ones I didn't know, but that was expected. Then I flipped to the 3rd page. My blood went cold. Table 7 was near the back of the reception hall, partially obscured by a decorative pillar. The names listed for that table made my hands start shaking. Michael Razor, Romano, Vincent Castellanos, Anthony Three Fingers, Marconi, James Torino, Sophia, Benedetti, Maria Santos. I stared at the names, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. These weren't Rachel's friends. These weren't David's family members. These were names I recognized from something else entirely, something that had nothing to do with weddings or celebrations. "Mark," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the music. "These names. I know exactly who they are," he said quietly. "And we need to get out of here, right now." The story goes back 3 years, to when I was working as a legal secretary at a prominent law firm downtown. I'd been assigned to assist with a major federal case, a RICO investigation targeting organized crime families in our city. For months, I'd been typing up witness statements, organizing evidence, scheduling depositions. The case was huge, front-page news for weeks, multiple crime families, money laundering, racketeering, drug trafficking, and worse. I'd seen photos of the defendants, memorized their names, read their rap sheets. The trial lasted 8 months, and when it was over, 12 high-ranking members of 3 different crime families were sentenced to lengthy federal prison terms. I'd also seen the witness list, the people who had testified against them, the people whose testimony had put them away. My husband Mark had been one of those witnesses. Mark was a former Army intelligence officer who'd transitioned into private security after his military service. 3 years ago, he'd been working for a company that provided security for federal witnesses and high-profile clients. During one assignment, he'd witnessed a meeting between several crime family members and corrupt city officials. What he'd seen and heard became crucial evidence in the federal case. Mark had testified behind closed doors, his identity protected, his testimony sealed. but he'd been the key witness who connected all the pieces, whose evidence had been instrumental in securing those convictions. And now, somehow, 6 of the people connected to that case were sitting at table 7 at my sister's wedding. "How is this possible?" I asked Mark, trying to keep my voice steady. "How are they here?" "How do they even know, Rachel?" Mark's eyes were still scanning the room, and I could see him mentally calculating distances to exits, counting security personnel, assessing threats. "I don't know, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that if they're here, they know who I am, and if they know who I am—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. I understood. "We have to tell Rachel," I said. "We have to warn her that we can't." Mark's voice was firm. "If we cause a scene, if we panic, it could make things worse. Right now, they might not know we've spotted them. If we play this right, we can just slip out quietly." I looked toward the head table where Rachel was laughing with David, completely oblivious to the danger potentially lurking in her reception hall. She looked so happy, so radiant in her wedding dress. How could I just leave her? "I won't abandon my sister," I said. Mark's expression softened slightly. "I'm not asking you to abandon her. I'm asking you to trust me. If these people are here for the reason I think they are, then the safest thing for everyone, including Rachel, is for us to leave quietly and call for help from somewhere else. What if you're wrong? What if they're just, I don't know, coincidences? People with similar names?" Mark pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. He'd somehow managed to take a discreet photo of table 7. The faces staring back at me from his phone were older, grayer, but unmistakably the same people from the federal case files I'd seen 3 years ago. Michael Razor Romano, who'd been sentenced to 15 years for racketeering and money laundering, Vincent Castellanos, 12 years for drug trafficking, Anthony Three Fingers Marconi, 20 years for multiple counts of extortion and murder conspiracy. They were all supposed to be in federal prison. "How are they here?" I whispered. "I don't know," Mark said. "Early release, appeals, witness protection deals gone wrong? There are a dozen possibilities. But Emma, if they're here, at your family's wedding, it's not a coincidence." The implications hit me like a truck. Somehow, these convicted criminals had not only gotten out of prison, but they'd also tracked down Mark's connection to me, to my family. They'd found out about Rachel's wedding and had somehow gotten themselves added to the guest list. "Oh my God," I breathed. "Rachel, David, all these people are in danger as long as we're here," Mark finished. "If we leave now, quietly, maybe they'll follow us and leave the wedding alone. If we stay—" I looked around the reception hall with new eyes. The 150 wedding guests laughing and dancing and celebrating had no idea they were sharing space with convicted felons who might be planning violence. "How do we get out without being noticed?" I asked. Mark had already thought this through. "The service entrance, through the kitchen. But we need to move now before they realize we've made them." I took one last look at Rachel, spinning on the dance floor in David's arms, her face glowing with joy. I wanted to run to her, to grab her and drag her to safety, to scream at everyone to get out. But Mark was right. Causing a scene could escalate whatever was happening into something much worse. I stood up slowly, as if I was just going to the restroom. Mark followed my lead. We walked casually toward the back of the reception hall, smiling and nodding at guests, trying to look like we were just mingling. The service entrance was through a corridor past the restrooms. As we walked, I could feel eyes on us, and I fought the urge to look back toward table 7. Mark's hand was on my lower back, guiding me forward, his body tense and ready. We'd almost made it to the corridor when I heard a voice behind us. "Mark? Mark Sullivan?" We both froze. The voice was gravelly, with a slight accent I remembered from witness recordings. Mark's hand pressed more firmly against my back, urging me forward, but it was too late. "I thought that was you." We turned around slowly. Vincent Castellanos was standing about 10 feet away, wearing an expensive suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. He was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Vincent," Mark said carefully, "I heard you were away." "Got out 6 months ago. Good behavior. Castellanos' smile widened. Amazing what a good lawyer can do, right? Overturned conviction, prosecutorial misconduct, witness tampering. You know how it is. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Other guests were moving around us, chatting and laughing, completely unaware of the tension crackling between Mark and this dangerous man. "Well," Mark said, "congratulations, we were just heading out. So soon? But the party's just getting started." Castellanos' eyes flicked to me. "You must be the wife. Emma, right? Sister of the bride? You look lovely." The fact that he knew my name, knew my relationship to Rachel, confirmed our worst fears. This wasn't a coincidence. They'd researched us, planned this. "Thank you," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady. "It's been a beautiful wedding." "Yes, it has. Your sister seems very happy. Be a shame if anything ruined such a perfect day." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Mark stepped slightly forward, putting himself between Castellanos and me. "What do you want, Vincent?" "Just to catch up with an old friend, maybe have a conversation about the past, about testimony, about consequences." "This isn't the place," Mark said firmly. "I disagree. I think this is the perfect place. All your family here, celebrating, enjoying themselves. Reminds you what you have to lose, doesn't it?" That's when I saw the other men from table 7 moving through the crowd toward us. They were trying to be casual about it, but they were definitely positioning themselves around us. Mark saw them too. His military training kicked in, and I could see him calculating odds, escape routes, potential weapons. "Ladies' room," he said quietly to me. "Go to the ladies' room. Now." "I'm not leaving you," I whispered back. "Emma, go, get to safety and call 911. But before I could move, Castellanos spoke again, louder this time. "You know, Mark, I've spent 3 years thinking about you, about your testimony, about how my family lost everything because of what you said in that courtroom." Other wedding guests were starting to notice the tension. The music was still playing, but conversations were stopping as people sensed something was wrong. "Vincent," Mark said, his voice carrying a warning. "There are innocent people here. Whatever issue you have is with me. Let's take this outside." "Oh, but that's where you're wrong. See, I don't just have an issue with you. I have an issue with everyone who helped put me away. Every witness, every lawyer, every person who was part of that case. And that includes your lovely wife here, who worked on all those documents, who organized all that evidence against my family." Ice ran through my veins. He knew. He knew exactly what role I'd played in the case. "Emma was just doing her job," Mark said. "And I'm just doing mine." That's when everything went to hell. Castellanos reached into his jacket, and Mark reacted instantly. Years of military and security training took over. He tackled Castellanos to the ground just as the man was pulling out what looked like a gun. Screams erupted throughout the reception hall. Wedding guests scattered in every direction, tables overturning, champagne glasses crashing to the floor. The band stopped playing abruptly. The other men from table 7 were moving now, no longer trying to be subtle. I saw at least 2 more guns being drawn. "Everyone get down!" Mark shouted from the floor where he was struggling with Castellanos. "Call 911!" I dropped to my knees behind an overturned table, my heart racing. Through the chaos, I could see Rachel across the room, still in her wedding dress, David trying to shield her as they crouched behind the head table. Gunshots rang out. Not many, but enough to send the remaining wedding guests into complete panic. People were screaming, crying, running for exits. The beautiful reception hall had turned into a war zone. I heard sirens in the distance. Someone had called the police, or maybe the venue had some kind of silent alarm. Help was coming, but it felt like an eternity away. Mark had somehow managed to disarm Castellanos and was using zip ties from his pocket to restrain him. Even at my sister's wedding, he'd come prepared. The other men seemed to be backing off now that their plan had failed and sirens were approaching. "Emma!" Mark called out. "You okay?" "I'm okay," I called back, though I wasn't sure that was entirely true. I was shaking. My ears were ringing from the gunshots, and my beautiful bridesmaid dress was torn and stained. Police officers burst through the main entrance, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The situation was chaotic, but they seemed to quickly assess that Mark was one of the good guys and the men from Table 7 were the threats. It took about 20 minutes for the police to secure the scene and take statements. The men from Table 7 were arrested, and we learned that they'd all been released from federal prison on various technicalities over the past year. They'd been planning their revenge against the witnesses from their trial, and Mark and I had been high on their list. They'd somehow obtained information about Rachel's wedding and had managed to get fake identities added to the guest list. Their plan had been to confront us during the reception, possibly take hostages, and exact their revenge for the testimony that had put them away. The investigation revealed the depth of their planning was terrifying. They'd been watching us for months, learning our routines, studying our family connections. They knew Rachel's wedding date before some of our relatives did. They'd infiltrated the catering company to get access to the guest list and had even bribed a venue employee to add their fake names without question. What chilled me most was learning they'd considered using the wedding cake as a weapon, hiding something inside it that could have poisoned dozens of innocent guests. Only their desire to confront Mark personally had prevented them from going through with that plan. Rachel was devastated that her perfect wedding had been ruined, but she was also incredibly grateful that Mark had recognized the threat and prevented something much worse from happening. "How did you know?" she asked him later, after we'd given our statements to the FBI agents who'd arrived on scene. "How did you spot the danger so quickly?" "The names on the guest list," Mark explained patiently. "I remembered them from the case files. When I saw them all together at one table, I knew it couldn't be a coincidence." "But how did you remember all those names from 3 years ago?" Mark glanced at me, then back at Rachel. "When you testify against people like that, you don't forget their names. You can't afford to. Your life depends on remembering." The aftermath was extensive. The FBI reopened investigations into how these men had been released, who had helped them obtain false identities, and whether there were other witnesses from the original case who might be in danger. Mark and I had to go into temporary protective custody while the authorities sorted everything out. It turned out that this group had been planning revenge against multiple witnesses, and our narrow escape at Rachel's wedding had prevented what could have been a much larger and more deadly campaign. During our time in protective custody, we learned the full extent of their revenge network. They'd compiled detailed dossiers on 12 former witnesses, complete with family photos, daily schedules, and vulnerability assessments. The FBI found surveillance equipment outside schools, workplaces, and homes across 3 states. Rachel and David had to cut their honeymoon short to deal with the investigation and the media attention. Their wedding photos showed overturned tables and police officers instead of the romantic memories they'd planned to create. But they were alive. We were all alive. And that was because Mark had paid attention to details that seemed insignificant to everyone else. "You saved everyone at that wedding," I told him later. "I just read a guest list," he said modestly. "No, you did more than that. You stayed alert. You remembered. You acted decisively when it mattered. The men from Table 7 were rearrested and charged with new crimes: conspiracy, weapons violations, attempted kidnapping, and making terrorist threats. This time, their convictions stuck, and they received much longer sentences without possibility of parole. Mark and I eventually came out of protective custody, but we had to relocate and change some of our routines. The experience changed us, made us more aware of our surroundings, more careful about sharing personal information. Rachel and David eventually had a small second ceremony for just family and close friends, a do-over wedding without the threat of violence. It was beautiful and peaceful, and this time, Mark carefully vetted the guest list himself beforehand. 6 months later, we received letters from other witnesses thanking us. Our actions at the wedding had saved their lives too. Jennifer Walsh wrote that FBI agents had found bombs planted in her car after our incident exposed the network. Michael Torres discovered tracking devices on his children's bicycles. The ripple effect of Mark's quick thinking had prevented a coordinated attack that could have killed dozens of innocent people. The whole experience taught me that danger can come from the most unexpected places. a wedding guest list, a chance encounter, a moment of recognition, but it also taught me the importance of having someone who pays attention, who remembers, who acts when others might ignore warning signs. Mark saved our lives that day by doing something simple, reading a guest list and trusting his instincts completely. So what do you think? Was Mark right to insist we leave immediately, or should we have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories about the unexpected dangers hiding behind closed doors, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell.